A bit snug, this one. That's right, got them in, got everything lined up, and get the screw in place. Check that they're tight, and check that the door opens and closes. That runs nicely, so that part's done. Next I can turn my attention to the film advance. Let's start with something easy. I'll get the tripod socket back on the camera so that the back door's not flying open every time I bang the thing down on the tabletop. Ah. That's good. Now here's the release lever, and the spring for it I have straightened that up because that was a little bit bent. Now I've got to get that over the stud on there, which is always a little bit difficult. No, it went easily today. Make a liar out of me. Right, release lever and lock lever. Usually wipe into the holes where they run through the body with a bit of molybdenum paste, and down here where that spring acts against the edge of that channel. Likewise at the top where the two shafts come through. And I will start with the lock lever. Drop that in. Now I think there was a hint that that thing wasn't moving smoothly when I started, wasn't there? Seems to be fine now. There are two springs that look fairly similar. One of them is lighter and has fewer coils than the other one. That's the one for the lock lever. The other one goes to the release lever. And here's the little circlip, so I'm keeping that spring depressed with my thumb while I put the circlip in place. And it should press into place with a bit of luck. That's better. I don't normally fight. Just checking that that drops out nicely. And the release lever. Well, the main thing you want to watch here is not to distort the spring. It's easily damaged, and you want to make sure you don't catch it on the edge of the body while you're pushing the release lever in place. Just got to line that up with the hole in the top of the body. Yeah, don't do that. Okay, so I'm supporting that with my finger from underneath. And that was the heavier of the two screws, two springs that look much the same goes on here. So I'll put that over the top and get the screw in the top. Now that's going into a split shaft, so it's a bit awkward to get that screw started sometimes. And the split shaft provides a bit of tension so that you've got some adjustment, and when you make the adjustments stay where you left them. I'm just checking here the relative height of the shutter release and that release lever, and I want to take the screw down slightly more than that. There should be a bit of clearance there. I'll just take that down another turn. That's plenty. So now, this is the film advance shaft. Here's the bush for the base. Come on camera, hurry up. This is the bush for the base of the take-up spool. And we have 3 small screws that hold everything together. And I'll just double check to make sure I'm not picking up chrome plated screws that should be in the top cover. No, that all looks good. This has to be greased with graphite grease, typically I use, although if you can't get it you can use just about anything you like. Right, stage 1. Take the nicely cleaned take-up spool, which I only ever wipe very lightly at the base to get rid of any grease with naphtha, and I never use anything more wicked than naphtha on that. Any solvents tend to eat plastic, so I found that I get away with that nicely. That works well. Right, so graphite grease. Here I've got the film advance shaft. I can see that this is well worn. The first coil of the spring often bites into the shaft of this thing, and I suppose it's because it's a nice hard steel spring and it just bites into that nickel plated brass very easily. But what I'm doing is making sure I've got a good layer of grease between this bush. I'm pulling the bush back up out of the way and getting some graphite grease onto the shaft. I want to make sure that that's worked in well. That appears to be very good. Normally I just lubricate the little ratchet here with synthetic grease. There's a ratchet top and bottom. One controls the advance, the movement of the forward advance, the forward movement of your film advance lever. One controls the return to the rest position. Okay, so that's all lubricated and ready to go. I can drop that in from the top, and I'm lining up. I'll flip my lock lever out of the way. I'm lining up the gear on the bottom here, lining this all up so that everything's in place. This is the neutral position. That would be the rest position, except I've got no tension on there at the moment. 3 small screws. See if I can get those in and get them started. These are nickel plated. Don't use the chrome plated ones that belong in the top cover. Right, they're all in place. I'll tighten those up. That's that part. Now at the top of the camera I need to put the clutch assembly in there. So I've got to assemble that. The clutch assembly is 3 pieces, and I'll use graphite grease to lubricate this. And it's just because this particular graphite grease that I've got here works very well. Now, where is the pliers? Right, back in business. So there's a little tab on this spring, fits neatly into that notch in the centerpiece, and you've got to compress it. And I use a pair of crimp lug pliers. If I rotate that, no, it's not doing it for me. Right, that's in position. Get my pliers on the top. rotate that clockwise to pull the spring into place. Put the outside over the top, and I've got the outside on upside down. Should have been wearing my glasses. Let's do that again. It's the problem when you try and do things blind. It almost worked. Right, get that hooked over there. Get the pliers in place. Roll that round to pull the spring in. Put the outer on the right way up. No, it's not my day. Now I've got everything properly greasy, it is slipping in my fingers. That time. We'll just pretend it went like that the first time. That's good. Usually I put a wipe of synthetic grease through the centre of that. Drop that in the top. Engage that with the top of the take-up spool. Here's the guide bush for the film advance shaft. And the little pinions here are unlubricated at the moment. I'll put a glob of grease on there, squeeze it with my thumb, and the hydraulic pressure will drive that in, and put that in place. Roll the take-up spool with my thumb, and that will help engage this pinion with the gear on the clutch, and it drops in. 2 screws. One of them's gone hiding. Yes, it is. Where's the post? I had it here a second ago. It is... No, it's properly hiding. It wasn't hiding well enough. I've got it back. This is what we want. This is the post. It's got a shoulder on the top that supports the cocking rack. On the other side, there's this little bush, plain side up, not countersunk side up. This little pawl goes on there like that. Here's the screw that goes through there. It's got a shoulder on it that little pawl can revolve around, and I just put a spot of grease on that for good measure. Get that screw in place, run it down, make sure that the pawl can move, that it's not trapped underneath that screw in some fashion. And I'll just do those 2 screws up lightly because I'll probably want to slacken them off in a second before I get something else done. Here is the spring for that pawl. It acts to push the pawl towards the centre. So I'll get that in place over the head of that screw. Of course, my screwdriver is magnetic, so that's causing me problems. Yes, that's all hooked in position. That's working as it should do. Now at this stage, because assembling this film advance can be awkward because the shaft can push down and the levers get trapped underneath it. Normally I take my tripod sockets around, just park that underneath the film advance so the shaft can't press down, can't get away. This gear goes on next, and I'm just applying some grease to the inside of that. And if I rotate that anti-clockwise, it'll push the ball out of the way and fall into place. At least that's the idea. Just like that. So I normally line that up front and aft, fore and aft. This leaf spring goes in next. Like that. I usually put a touch of grease on that because I don't want it getting rusty, because it's a high carbon steel. It seems to be a bit more prone to rusting than mild steels. Right, and this drive dog goes on there. That washer, then the gear from the top of the shaft. Now, one of these teeth has got something wrong with it. It's got some minor damage. I'm just going to put it pointing this way towards the end of the camera. That will keep that out of contact from the cocking rack, because this only swings through a partial arc. And now I need the screwdriver to drive this down. That's in place. Okay, so that little bit of stuff is all done. At the base of the camera again, I want to get in place the lever that locks the rewind button in place. So that's this thing here. Now normally I give the tip of this a wipe with molybdenum paste. That's that rounded tip. That's where it engages with the film advance. And I usually give it a wipe through the pivot point just because I've got this in my hand. It slides in under here. The return spring goes there. And there's a shoulder screw that goes through and holds all that together. Now the shoulder screw has two shoulders, one for the spring, one for the lever. See if I can get this to run in nicely for me without any arguments. Making sure that the lever can move freely. Tighten that screw up, and the spring I need to hook behind there, so I can swing the lever that way, pick the spring up, hook it behind the lever so that the lever is now sprung loaded. Easy when you know how. Sprocket shaft, sprocket. I'll lubricate the sprocket shaft towards the bottom here with some synthetic grease, the same towards the top here. Usually I just wipe a bit on the teeth for good measure. Open the back of the camera. Put the sprocket in, slot side up. Feed the shaft down from the top. Hang on, rubber bands come off here, and so, shutter release has fallen out. Hang on, I've got to rescue this situation, otherwise I'm in trouble. Okay. Get down from the top. Get it gently through the sleeve, gently through the spring. It's in position. That's what happened when I tipped the camera on its head and the rewind went down and the rubber band popped off. And that was nearly curtains. Okay, back where I was, holding the camera upside down but carefully, not knocking the rewind on the table. I want to see if I can get that rewind shaft, the sprocket shaft, down in place. It's just come through the bottom there. I've just rolled my take-up spool slightly and it engaged the gear at the top, and this has come all the way through. I want to get the coupling screw in. It couples the shaft and the take-up spool, the sprocket shaft and the sprocket together. That's this little screw here. Sometimes this will engage quickly. I'm going to have to do something about this magnetic screwdriver before it drives me nuts. Other times you'll find that it'll only engage easily on one side of the shaft. You might have to rotate the shaft 180 degrees to get to where the screw will engage. No, we're in business. That's done. Rewind button. Rewind button washer. Rewind button spring. Now the camera is telling me that the batteries are very tired, so if I'm quick, we'll get this done before the camera shuts down, and if I'm not, we won't. Stack those together, screw them on from the base, goes into the bottom of the sprocket shaft. Check that the button passes through the washer, that it's not trapped against the edge of the washer. Open the back of the camera, hold the sprocket with my thumb, tighten the button with the spanner. That part's done, and I can change this video camera battery before it dies. Right, I can put the chrome trim plate on the top here now, I think. I'll just tighten these two screws up that I had left slightly loose before. Now they can be tightened up. Here's our chrome trim from the top of the camera. This is held in with a strap lug at this end, and that strap lug, as you can see, is bent. It's not supposed to be a nicely rounded hook like that. So I've got to see if I can straighten this up. That's something more like it. Don't go overboard trying to straighten things like that. You can break them and then you're worse off than you were to start off with. So get it somewhat straightened up. And it's held in place with two screws. And that will hold the chrome trim in place. Now here I'm pushing this strap lug towards the end of the camera, hard up against the heads of the screws. Experience has taught me that that's the appropriate place for that. Those holes are slightly slotted. Let's move this rubber band around there. It's less likely to fall off. And I need to start thinking about the shutter cocking rack. Before that goes in, I've got to tension my film advance one full turn. Let's prop this up on something so I'm not going to disturb anything important. Okay, so that. Here's another pair of tweezers. These ones. Right. Now I've got this, the lock levers, I've got it pulled up and pushed out of the way. I can hold back the release lever, rotate this one full turn clockwise and drop the release lever and the lock lever back in place to hold that in position. I've got my chrome trim for the base of the camera, which I can put in place. I've got to be careful now not to hit the release lever on the table, otherwise that will all unwind and I'll have all the fun of taking the base plate off and putting everything back again, which I could do without. So the base plate, I want to get at least 3 screws in down here because I want to put the advance lever on there before I disturb anything. So I'm being very careful to make sure I have got nickel plated screws and not chrome plated screws. There's 3 of those in position. The screws from the base plate here are often quite ugly looking. It's because they were typically covered in glue and rubbish when they were taken out. Right, so I'll just put that gently down there and prepare the film advance lever and put that in place. Alright, carefully not hitting the camera on the table. I'll get my advance lever in position. My freshly cleaned and prepared advance lever. That little rubber buffer pad in there had perished with age, and I just replaced that with a piece of suitable adhesive backed rubber. Well, it probably wasn't rubber, it was some synthetic. Okay, so there's my advance lever in place. If I press the release button, hold down the lock lever, I can swing that, the film advance moves nice and smoothly, and I can put the shutter cocking rack in place. So I'll lubricate this with some synthetic grease. And put this into position. I've got 2 teeth engaged at the end there. I want to see if that will work. It does. If you take it too far along, you may find that it runs up against a chrome trim and that the advance lever won't swing through the full arc. This little clamp down plate goes on here. There's a screw at this end. And the post for the film release button goes here. I'll just check that I've got that looking like it's sitting somewhere nice and square. Check the action of that film advance, that it moves freely. 2 screws on the strap lug. Now there was a space or a shim under something here. It was under this strap lug, I think. So I'll tighten this up in place and I'll see if it needs a shim. It may or it may not. It's not uncommon for when things have got a bit of mileage on them and a bit of wear, that the clearances are such that you do not need the shims to provide clearance. And that's moving nice and smoothly, so there's no problem there. I've got 1 stray screw here, that's the post for the meter that was normally screwed in here. That can go back in place. So the film advance is moving nicely, that's all moving freely, nothing binding up. Because the film advance lever was just sticking before we started, and really there's been nothing dramatic done except cleaning and lubrication. Alright, well, the body's looking good at that stage. I can put the other screws into the base plate, I think, and just tidy that up.